So, hello everyone. We'll get started. My name's Josh. You can see here on the slide, I work here at Expium. I'm a personal development coach. I'm a SAFe certified Scrum Master and a Myers-Briggs trained facilitator. I lead the team building and professional development program here at Expium, and I'm very passionate about what can be possible with that. I'm also a game master. I'll talk about that a little bit more later on. So, ahead too quickly. Hold on. Sorry about that. Before we start, I would like to just let you guys know a little bit about who we are as a company. So, some information. Expium is a platinum solutions partner with Atlassian, and what that means is that we provide a series of services that have to do with Atlassian products like Jira, Trello, Bitbucket, and a lot of new products coming in on the cloud. And so we partner with Expium in order to enable Expium, or we partner with Atlassian in order to enable Atlassian users to get the most out of their programs. One of our key services is training. We have a Jira Bootcamp, which is our flagship course. It's a 3-day deep dive into Jira, which is perfect for Jira admins and super users. So that's really exciting. I've been through that a couple times. We also have boot camps for Confluence and Jira Service Management. And what I'm particularly excited about is that we now offer workshops geared towards helping teams and teamwork and ultimately helping teams work better together. Essentially, Expium, which is a subsidiary company of Valiantis, offers consulting across the entire Atlassian suite of products for a wide range of organizations, both large and small, and their teams. Regarding the solutions we provide, I just want to say that we have an entire team of full stack developers who create custom software. So if something doesn't exist for you yet, we can build it. That said, let's talk a little bit about why we're here today. So my goal today is to help you make your meetings more exciting. And I'm here to do that by teaching you how to leverage conflict, which can be uncomfortable, to get the benefit of everyone's unfiltered ideas and opinions. So, boom. This line of thinking started for us a while ago during the pandemic and lockdown. You can see here in this slide, this is our office in St. Louis, Missouri. And we really treasure having a place where we can all meet. That's kind of a place where creativity can flow and lots of conversations can happen. During the pandemic, that was not the case, especially during the lockdown. And although we all knew that we theoretically had the technology to be able to communicate with each other, there was an issue in the fact that the conversations that we'd been having before were not happening. The sort of discussions that could take place as people were meeting each other in the hallway or being able to drop in on someone's office or being able to schedule some time in an office for a meeting were not the same. There was a lot of difficulty that we were finding in maintaining our company culture and maintaining our values, especially as we were bringing on new hires who hadn't even experienced what it was like to be there in the office. It became very daunting and very clear to us that we needed to do something to improve the communication that was going on in our teams. And so we turned to the literature to try and figure out, okay, what can we do? What tools do we know already exist? So we looked at this book, The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team. The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team is an awesome book. If you haven't read it, it is one of my favorites. It's written by Patrick Lencioni, and it's essentially a fable of an executive team at a made-up Silicon Valley company that is highly dysfunctional. And it's about an outside CEO coming in and taking over for the current CEO and the challenges that she faces as she brings the different heads of marketing and technology and product all in line with the company's vision. And it's really exciting to read, but underlying it are these 5 key principles of dysfunctions: the absence of trust, the fear of engaging in conflict, the lack of commitment, the avoidance of accountability, and the inattention to results are all sort of underlying themes the main character is kind of grappling with and teaching to this executive team, and you get to kind of like watch as she does this, and it is really awesome for sort of understanding a lot of the underpinnings of what it might actually look like in practice to be implementing these things with your team, not just as a hypothetical theory, but as something that you can bring to them. So that gave us a lot of different insights in terms of what we can do to build back relationships. And we came to a couple of really key ones. And one of our favorite ones we'll be talking about at the end, which is tabletop role playing, specifically uh, kind of a famous board game that exists called Dungeons and Dragons. And I'll talk a little bit about what that means and why it's applicable and why it's different than a board game. But anyway, that was one solution that we came to, as well as just trying to put a lot of these things into practice and teaching these things to our managers. So we did a video recently on the absence of trust. This one, we're going to be talking about the fear of conflict. So, conflict. I want to start today by talking about what I mean by conflict. So, conflict is not necessarily about war or a shouting match or an uncomfortable or hostile disagreement that might exist between people. It's not so much like that sort of uh, difficulty, although it can look like that. But what I mean by conflict is simply an anxious situation that needs to be resolved. And that situation can look like a couple of different things. It might look like two people who are engaged in that. It might look like a person going up against nature, or it might even be an internal struggle. But ultimately, something is at stake in a conflict. And that could be your own personal happiness. That could be the success of your product. It could be your customers' faith in your brand, or it could be the functionality of a tool that you're working on. All these things are possible. And so these stakes that exist, the personal happiness, it causes us to engage in conflict when things are not going in the direction that we might think is best, and being able to engage and work out that situation with other individuals. So the stakes are why it's important to have the conflict. Because often when we're making decisions in business, there is not really any room for us to make bad decisions or for us to mismanage our resources or our people. Open conflict and disagreement is actually what gets us the best results by having people on the team debate the merits of their different viewpoints. We're going to talk a little bit more about debating later. So for an example, I want to look at the movies. I think it's exciting when we watch a movie and we get hooked into a movie by the conflict that's present in it. So can the leading man trust the leading lady to be faithful? Might be something that we're wondering about, maybe from the beginning of the movie. Or can the leading man pick himself up after a devastating divorce? Can he find love again? That might be another really interesting conflict for a movie. Can the leading lady live with the loss of her good friend and get her business off the ground? And one of my favorites, can the family uncover the secret of the hotel before madness takes hold and everyone winds up murdered? The Shining. So this uncertainty and kind of light anxiety that we experience as audience members is what has us lean in and become curious about what's going on in the movie. These fictional events start to take on a weight as we see the stakes come to light and discover the consequences of the characters' actions. You might be wondering, okay, so yeah, movies are great, but what does that have to do with my team? Most of our meetings are not like that. They're not movies. But my question for you is, what if your meetings could grip you as tightly as a great movie, if there was something actually at stake in the meeting? So that brings us to my first tool here, which is present the conflict up front. That means present it to your team. So You know your teams, you know the issues that they're dealing with, you know the consequences that could exist if there is a bad decision made. You know, people could get hurt, teams could get moved around, folks could lose their jobs. The product just might not succeed and promotions might not happen. All of these things are actually very important and relevant to your team, but they're not often thought about when we're having a meeting. Um, there's also the different dependencies that might exist within your organization as you're looking at, well, if we don't get this done, then they're not going to get that done, and there are these consequences that could exist. So this doesn't mean scaring your team, but it does mean heightening their anxiety a little bit and letting them know the importance of making a good decision. It sets people up to participate in the discussion. And once you've sort of called them out into the open to discuss like these conflicts, they know what's at stake. That should spur them on to engage in the discussion about whatever product or issue you're dealing with at the table. Every good movie is going to capture you within the first 10 minutes of it. If it's doing its job right, you're going to know what's happening there. So it's really important that if you have something you want to discuss at a meeting, that you know it's critical that your team talk about and that there might be differing opinions on, let them know why that's important. I'll give you an example of this in a second. But essentially explain the danger of making a bad decision and why it's important to come to the best decision you can for your team. So let's take a look actually from the book. This is a quote from the Five Dysfunctions book. This takes place when Catherine, the CEO, has called the entire executive team together at a retreat that a lot of them don't want to go to. And it's the very first day of the retreat as she walks in the boardroom and starts to talk with them. You can imagine kind of the awkward atmosphere that might be there, the sense of shuffling or discomfort or wondering what this is all about. Why are we not working? Why are we here? What's the point of all this? And then she says this to the team, and I'll read it out loud for you to sort of set it. All right, everyone. We have a more experienced and talented executive team than many of our competitors. We have more cash than they do, and thanks to Martin and his team, we have better core technology. And we have a more powerful board of directors. Yet, in spite of all that, we are behind two of our competitors in terms of both revenue and customer growth. Can anyone here tell me why that is? Silence. She's making it very clear because she wants to talk about teamwork. That's essentially what she's leading in on, that this is going to be about. But nonetheless, she's calling forward certain problems and challenges and risks that the business is currently dealing with. And the team has to grapple with this because they may or may not know the answer to the reason why. And they might all have different opinions as to why they're behind their competitors in terms of revenue and customer growth. But unless a real discussion is had, nothing gets anywhere. And that's why this dysfunction is referred to as the fear of conflict, because often conflict is something that we want to avoid. There are lots of reasons for this as people. And there's really not much of a point in terms of digging into why that will be, although I'm sure we'll cover a couple of reasons as we keep on going here. The key thing, though, to remember as a leader is to create an environment where it's okay to have conflict. Now, teams that can participate in a passionate debate about ideas will have a direct impact on how they spend their time and energy. They're going to engage in subjects that are relevant to their lives, both in the long term and the short term. What your team is working on is incredibly relevant to what they're doing. And frankly, it's about whether the team can put bread on the table. And the ultimate result, if everyone is willing to engage and share their different viewpoints, is that ultimately the decision you're going to make is going to be able to take into account everyone's point of view. And then it's up to the leader, obviously, to make the call as to what they feel is best. So we're drawn into movies and human dramas because they keep us on the edge of our seats. We're drawn into stories because of the conflict that exists within it. So if a meeting contains no conflict, there's no point. It could have been an email. You're just sharing information. But the one amazing thing that exists in Agile a lot is individuals and interactions. And so you want to put the priority on that. Are we having the interactions? is this an interesting topic, or are we all sitting there bored out of our minds? Because if we're bored, that probably means the real issues aren't being talked about, or just that they've already been covered and the meeting's unnecessary at the very least. So conflict is not always physical. You can have a very deep story of a person struggling with themselves. Eternal sunshine of the spotless mind is the first thing that comes to me. How do you grieve a relationship? How do you deal with loss? And that same sense, you can have these honest discussions with your team about the subjects that are relevant to you. And this can happen at any level of an organization. However, stoking the flames of conflict can ultimately come crashing down if you're lacking one key thing, and that is trust between team members. If there is a lack of trust on a team, conflict can become destructive. Or at the very least, it just won't happen. People won't share their real opinions. And some of the things that can be like key indicators of unhealthy conflict here would be unwilling to be seen as wrong, either by passionately defending your viewpoint in the face of evidence, or just simply not voicing anything at all because you don't want to be wrong, you don't want to be judged. Another is being unwilling to admit shortcomings. You don't want to be seen as a worse performer and potentially put your job in jeopardy. Another is false attributions for others' behavior. This can happen a lot where you think someone is doing something because they're a jerk, or in some way you're misunderstanding their intention. And when others feel misunderstood by you, that just creates conflict anyway. So there's this feeling of kind of not being listened to. This can lead to power struggles where it's more about winning or getting your own way than actually debating the merits of a subject. And ultimately, some kind of key emotions to note here would be anger, annoyance, stress, reactivity, and blame. If you're seeing those, it's likely that there's some level of unhealthy conflict that exists, and likely that comes from a lack of trust. Whereas healthy conflict can look very different. People are passionate, they're engaged, they're engaging in an ideological debate of the ideas. I mean, I suppose it's important to consider for yourself as a listener if there are subjects that you feel are important to be raised on your team that are not being raised, that are critical to the success, but might not be coming up. Now, conflict can be uncomfortable. I completely understand that. And I would even understand if while I'm talking right now, you feel that you want to check out, or this isn't something that you want to worry about, like there's other stuff to do. But it can be very productive. And I'll talk for a second why I think conflict is uncomfortable, because that might actually be a key for you while you're listening here. So the main thing is that in conflict, things can get personal, and that's what makes it feel uncomfortable. We either feel attached to our ideas or our viewpoints. So if I say to you, hey, I'm sorry, Sally, but I really don't think your marketing plan is a very good one, that's probably going to feel bad on some level for anyone. But literally, even in a team that has trust, that's going to take place. Here's the key difference. A team that has a healthy amount of trust can take that. They can hear that not as a personal attack on them, but as a criticism of the idea. And the reason why is because they know that the person that they are talking to has their best interests at heart. They trust them. Sorry, one second. So essentially, it's not easy to let down your walls. Someone who we trust can tell us a hard truth about what we're doing, and we let them and we believe them and we take that in and we consider it because we trust them. We know that they're not out for any other reason than to help us make the best product or do what's best for us. There's that sense that you want, yeah, what I want and I want what you want. We're going to care about that. So that's really the key. You can see this in very healthy romantic relationships and familial relationships or friends, where someone can tell you those hard things that might be difficult for you to hear, But if you trust them, you'll let down your walls and you'll consider their viewpoint. So if you look back here on the healthy productive conflict, being willing to reconsider your positions is a hard thing to be able to do and might be uncomfortable. But if the other person is making a good point in the discussion, it's worth thinking about it and worth being able to do it. Again, listening to understand versus listening to win. Listening to think about how you can rebut the other person's point before you've really understood what they're saying. Now, trust can be a difficult thing to build on a team. It doesn't happen by accident, although it can if you have a lot of people who are just naturally have a high level of trust in their lives and strong relationships. But if you're interested in digging into what it actually takes to create trust, I would recommend going and looking at our last webinar, A Foundation of Trust, Tools and Strategies for Building Trust, because it doesn't happen by accident, and it does have to be cultivated by the leader of an organization or the leader of a team, such that people do feel open and like they're going to be appreciated and can admit their shortcomings and can admit kind of what's wrong without having to hold anything back for fear of what might happen if they engaged in that conflict, what the negative consequences might be. So that's really a lot of it. That's kind of the key thing in terms of this. If you want to take a screenshot, this is a great thing to kind of have as a reference. Yeah, I would say that is essentially it. And one thing that can happen is just team members who might have a tough time speaking up, who might, even if the leader is really doing a good job of creating a healthy space for them, there might be difficulty for some team members who might have had experiences in the past where they have had difficulty speaking up, or they're just not sure. They don't quite trust the team. So this kind of brings us to our last thing here on conflict. Oh, sorry, we have ensure a basis of trust. Look at that. They're catching each other. Love it. Dig up buried conflict. Now, I just want to say to be clear, I do not mean making problems where there is no need to. I am talking about the team member who might have an opinion that they're not sure if they can voice. So if you, as the leader, have any sort of instinct as to if a particular team member might have something they want to contribute, either they're using short sentences, or you've talked to them about this point before and you know that they might have some disagreements, encouraging them to speak up and share them. Hey, I just want to make sure we're okay. Ben, is there something else that you want to say before we move on? I want to give you the floor if you don't think that this fully aligns with what you think is best for the team. That's kind of one example of a way that you might bring up that discussion. Sorry here. Okay. This is also kind of called mining for conflict, but essentially it's the job of the leader or even another team member to step up and call out, hey, have you said everything that you want to say on this topic? So there are advantages to this, which is that there's kind of two key advantages. One is that if the person has a valid point to bring up that really contributes to what you're working on, to what they're going to be working on, you're going to want to hear that because that's just value added to the ultimate decision that your team is going to make. You want to know what the marketing person is thinking, not just what the salesperson is thinking. And if there are any bottlenecks or potential areas of issue that might be there, you also want to know what those are and encourage them to speak up. The second thing is it creates buy-in. So even if the person doesn't ultimately contribute something that changes the way that this goes, they feel they've been heard and they feel that their viewpoint has been taken into account, and thus they'll buy in more on the team decision. It sounds a little counterintuitive, but it has been my experience many times in the past that simply giving people the opportunity to voice their viewpoint, knowing that it's been heard, will help them give their full when it comes to being like, all right, this is what we're going to do as a team. This is what we're going to align on. And yeah, I'm sure you can find it in your experience as well if you try and practice this. So buy-in and then getting kind of the best product are sort of the two keys there. And while you're going through it, just remind everyone that you guys all have the same goal. You're all working towards the same thing. You want to make the best product that you can. You want to make the best decision that you can. You want to, like, you kind of want the hero to win the story. You want the conflict to come in and be resolved in a way that is fulfilling, that drives towards success. I mean, that's what keeps us engaged in every great movie. That's what makes us want the football team to win at the end of the day and work out all of their issues so that that final victory can be something that is truly fulfilling. And that's how you get a high performing team. People can be open, they can disagree, they can debate, they can pull the best ideas out of each other and challenge each other to be that one step better and more rational than they were before, and take into account all of the potential impacts that everyone can see. And that's quite inspiring, actually, is a team that can do that, because it is rare. One last thing that I'll talk about for this is just a little tool that I didn't make a slide for, but validate people when they are courageous enough to share their viewpoint and engage in a disagreement and might be feeling uncomfortable. Tell them that this is what I'm looking for. This is great. Keep on doing what you're doing. And again, I know it sounds silly. We're all adults. We probably don't think we need to be validated as much, but it helps. People relax. They know that the discomfort has a purpose. They know that they're not doing it wrong, even if it might feel uncomfortable. And it encourages them to more confidently debate their point, instead of maybe feeling guilty for having brought something up. I found that by and large, folks want to treat each other well and also want the best products to be made. And they just need to be given some tools, some encouragement, and some room to learn. The point really is to make a space that's safe enough for people to fail, do it wrong, do it right, and pick themselves up again and keep on learning. That's really the kind of leader that many people know me as, and that the kind of leader that I've really respected through my life and career have made it okay to do that. It's really key, we found here, to create a space where it is okay to make mistakes and fail and everything, and practice these skills. They don't necessarily happen overnight. They can take some time and some practice. And so at Expium, we intentionally created a safe space to practice conflict and other soft skills. We believe that these skills are incredibly important for our mission in general. They affect how we interface with each other, how we interface with clients, how we interface with our partner organizations. And the lack of these skills can create lots of problems, misunderstandings. It walls people off from others. It can cause bottlenecks. It's a problem. So we make a point of trying to practice it. So we devised a low stakes environment to be able to practice this conflict. And this brings me back to what I was talking about earlier. It's an imaginary game, and it's called Dungeons and Dragons. And yes, that is exactly like the movie that just came out recently. This is it's a board game, but it's not really like any board game that I would imagine many of you have played before. Although I do know that we've got a Dungeons and Dragons player in the house, so shout out to you. Essentially, what it is it's more conversational, and it's a storytelling game. So it involves a lot of those soft skills that we're looking to practice. People listening, taking in each other's points, being able to know how to insert themselves tactfully into a conversation, practicing assertiveness, things like that are all, and practicing conflict definitely happens in it as well. So essentially, in this game, you'll have about 4 to 6 players and one person who's a game master. And the players will each step into the role of a character that they create. That character is some sort of a hero. And it being a storytelling game, they'll invent the character and who they are. They'll sort of imagine what their personality is like, and imagine what their physical attributes are like and give them a chance to kind of create this persona. And then that's theirs for the rest of it. It's just like an actor playing a character in a movie. And everybody gets one character that they play. And the whole thing is guided by another person whose role is mostly to be a narrator and set the situations and the stakes for the other characters to engage with, for the main characters to kind of overcome and deal with. And they'll present challenges and kind of create an overall tone. And when rules do come up, because the game does have its own set of rules, it's not just a storytelling game, they'll help adjudicate those and make sure that everything kind of flows smoothly and the story's going in an interesting direction for everyone. So that is kind of big picture what it looks like. And I'll say that although the setting is imaginary and a lot of the circumstances are imaginary, the feelings are really real when people play. It kind of activates the imagination in a very powerful way. There's this whirlwind of laughter and creativity that can sort of be sparked as people go in and embrace the game and embrace their characters and embrace the situations and challenges that their characters come up to. So I think I'll give an example so that you can imagine a scenario that someone might go through for this. So in this scenario, I, as a narrator, would present this to the different players. You all play members of a large mercenary company that has landed on a jungle continent that looks very much like this slide here. The jungle has been largely untouched from the civilization that you come from, and you've landed on here as part of a contingent of, maybe 100 soldiers or so. And there's a fort that's been built on the hillside. And it's rainy and hot. It's very different than the land that you come from. But your goal here as a company is to find the resources that exist and take them and bring them home. And that's kind of been the mission of this place ever since you landed. Now, the 6 of you are all a squad. You work together, and you've worked together for a little bit of time now. Our story begins when you're called into the office of the High Commander of the forces here. You're standing at the fort, which is along the coast, and you come into her office, and she asks you, do any of you know why you're here right now? There'd be an opportunity for the players to respond. And then she'd make it very clear, we're here to make money and find resources. Now, about a year ago, another person from our company, a general, a commander, went up the main river in search of diamonds. There was evidence that it could be found. He took plenty of men with him. Since then, he has not shown any evidence of progress, and he is refusing to come back to fort to be held accountable and give a thorough update on what's going on. So your job as a group is to head up the river, find him, and figure out what's going wrong. I want to know what's happened to those diamonds. Understood? And then you as the players would then all be able to engage and ask questions and dig deeper to find out what this means. This is not a video game where there is a limited amount of choices, but rather one that exists in an open world where there's the opportunity to make meaningful choices. I think that the best way to kind of think about this game is like a choose your own adventure book. But instead of being limited to like, oh, I can turn to page 36 and go up to the attic, or I can turn to page 105 and go down to the basement, instead, you can choose to do whatever it is you want. And the book is not a book, but rather the game master, who then just tells you what happens. Say, for example, you say, I want to go up to, you're staying in an inn and it's the middle of the night, and you say, I want to go to the innkeeper's room. And I would then say, okay. So what happens is you head outside of your door, you walk down the hallway, and nobody's awake. You can hear the sound of bugs outside at night. and you slowly take steps. The wooden floor creaks underneath you, and eventually you get to the room, the door of the innkeeper's room, and you lean your ear on the door and you can hear the sound of snoring. What do you want to do? And then you would tell me what you want to do. And it kind of exists in that sort of call and response. I say something, you say something, and everyone gets to participate in this journey. So that's essentially what it is. And what's fun about it and what makes it a great playground specifically for conflict is that those who participate, not right now, can choose their own solutions, and they can also debate about what the best course of action is. As soon as you're presented with the situation in the jungle, you can start to ask yourselves, okay, what happened to this guy? Why is he up there? What other information do we know about him? Where did he come from? How many men did he take with him? Do we have a map? Do we know where he went? What kind of resources can we get? Can we get a boat? Can we get a canoe? Can we get a pontoon boat? How many men can we get with us? Is it just us? And how long do we have to complete this mission? And what else do we know about the jungle in terms of the area that he went to? And essentially, you can explore these things and start to come up together with an approach that you want to take, almost like taking on a new client and going through a discovery call with them about whatever issue they might have. You can start to put together what it is you need to do in order to take action and move things forward. Essentially, you have all the tools that you need, but what matters is the approach. And this leads for the opportunity to make meaningful decisions. Now, if you find that guy, are you going to tell him what you're there for? If you find this commander who's been up the river for a year, when you finally meet him, are you going to go up to him and say, "Hey, I was sent by high command. What's going on with you?" If you do that, that might create a confrontational scenario with him. There could be other consequences that come out of it. Or do you want to lie? Do you as a group decide we're going to pretend that we're someone else? We're going to try and get recon. We're going to do this as a spy mission, essentially. Is that what you want to do? Is that the best approach? That's going to come with its own set of risks and challenges that can exist in the game. Now, each game that we do generally lasts about 4 hours, and usually you can complete a mission like this in about 3 sessions. There are shorter stories, though, that can just be completed in 4 hours in like a single session. And there's even some interesting world building that you can do in just 1 hour, where we do character creation and let people sort of step into creating a character for themselves and learning what it might all be about. That is a really fun experience, and I love doing it. Feel free to message and reach out if you're interested in one of those for your team. We're happy to do those little 1 hour sessions as kind of like pro bono for free to let people try something like this. Essentially, the point is that your team is going to get to make meaningful choices and guide their own destiny. They feel empowerment and they get to be a self-directed team. Again, one of the main things of Agile is being a self-directed team. And this game we found is really great for letting our teams actually be self-directed and practice those soft communication skills. Because the whole thing exists in kind of like storytelling and speaking, it requires a lot of active listening, good note-taking, like smart decision-making and communication about what everyone is doing all at the same time, and that builds every single one of those skills. It forces people to take a stand. Now, it can just be a fun game that you kind of treat as like, oh, let's see what we can get away with and try different things. But if you take it seriously, we've found people can get a lot out of it. It's almost like a simulated environment. And well, it does great stuff for just building people's relationships and getting them to play with each other, which can sort of let their guards down and build towards that kind of trust we were talking about earlier. It also makes space for passionate debate. And as we said, groups that participate in passionate, open debate about which choice they want to pursue, or perhaps if there's some way they can like meet every possible goal that they would want, they're going to be more likely to succeed at this than teams that just rush in, don't communicate, end up taking different paths. This game can have consequences such as your character dying and other things like that. It can have very kind of negative or uncomfortable consequences that, although it's all fictional, again, the feelings tend to feel real. It tends to feel like, wow, I can't believe I couldn't do that, or what was missing? And then that gives the opportunity for a great breakdown conversation at the end where you can talk. And because it's a game, it's easier to discuss these things. You know that your job is not on the line, but you can practice those skills of being able to do it that will later show up in your retros and meetings. So, why do I think that this is a great tool? Experiential learning. We often learn by practicing things. Children learn how to walk by practicing walking and crawling and falling down until eventually they find the strength to walk on their own. They do not learn by being given a list of actions they need to take to be able to do it. There's an inbuilt, oh, are you back? There's an inbuilt mechanism for learning that exists in all of us that can exist in our experience. Now, this is not to knock informative learning. There's definitely a place and a time for taking tests and learning and being able to sort of understand a lot of information that's valuable. However, in experiential learning, we can do this practice of trying things on, seeing how well we can walk, falling down, and then maybe reflecting on what didn't go well and what we'd want to improve on next time. And then again, trying to walk again and trying to practice that. And it takes out some elements of perfectionism that can be difficult for people to overcome. It becomes okay to fail. And you can even learn that you can fail forward throughout the experience. And that's really how we learn a lot of other things: how to walk, how to talk, how to kiss, how to work in an office, or how to dance salsa. All of those things that were things that we mostly learned just by experience and doing them over time. So that's experiential learning. Experiential learning essentially works from we learn, and then we reflect, and then we do, and then we reflect, and then we learn. Like we kind of it follows this pattern of like action and reflection, essentially, kind of in and out of an experience. And it's similar in some ways to the iterative process that we use in sprints, where for 2 weeks we'll work on something and then we'll test it and we'll have something that others can experience or play with. And in that way, we're sort of learning things from each sprint that we're working on and hopefully iterating and creating a better product ultimately, as opposed to just trying to get everything perfect in one big go. So yeah, here all of that gets to happen in the space of the game. It's quite fun to play in and of itself. And it allows for a very broad, but not totally unlimited spectrum of possibilities, just like in real life. And it requires communication to get the most out of it. And when it's properly designed, it can stimulate some really meaningful choices. The more that I, as the game master, am providing my players with dilemmas that really matter, the more that they have the opportunity to put their stake in the ground and say what they're going to do about it. Yeah, that is tabletop gaming as a service. You can see if it's appropriate for your team. This is kind of how it works for us if you're interested in pursuing it further. You'd begin by scheduling a set of sessions with us. That can just be one session if you just want to try it. You'd schedule a package of sessions, and then players receive their packages, which are, we have little kind of like boxes that we send out with snacks and dice, like you can see down here, which are kind of part of the game, as well as, other fun things for playing. There's like a map of the world, stuff like that. When we actually show up to play, we'll do introductions, both of the individuals. People will be introduced to the role playing and the game mechanics. So I'll sort of talk them through in a little bit more detail what it actually looks like to play this. And then I'll start to introduce them to the plot and the game and the world and the adventure that they're going on. And before we jump in, it's really critical that we also talk about a working agreement. Because this is imaginary and open-ended and a little bit more casual than a normal day, it's important to have good boundaries with that. So working agreement is about creating good boundaries with the team. So you can definitely trust us to do that. Then they'll build their characters. Sometimes we'll do a deep dive into mechanics, but often I'll just jump in and go right into the first session. And those are half-day experiences. And they are pretty straightforward. At the beginning, you'll do a little exercise for your character, usually some sort of a creative writing kind of exercise. And then we'll play for most of it and then do a retrospective at the end to see kind of how things shook out, what kind of things you might be able to learn and apply for the next time you play the game, and possibly even for how your team functions outside of it. At the very end of the whole experience, so as soon as the series is over, I'll meet with the team lead and offer kind of recommendations and digest what their experience was like with it, new things you might have learned about your team, and new practices you want to put in going forward. This also is just a really great way, because it's so fun, to reward your team for a job well done and putting in hard effort. It's an awesome thing for relieving stress and can just generally help with that sort of flow of burnout and like deadlines and stuff like that. It can be really valuable in that way. And with that, we're pretty much done. Again, Expium is a platinum solutions partner of Atlassian, and we offer a couple of really key services for you if you're trying to implement or in the process of implementing the Atlassian suite of products. We offer training on a number of things, from migrations to the cloud to Jira Service Management. And like I said, Jira Bootcamp is kind of our flagship product and is a really great place if you are a super user or an admin of some sort, to get a much better handle on what is possible in Jira and different ways you can structure it. We also offer consulting for organizations, both large and small, to be able to get the most out of their Atlassian suite of products. And we often will go in there and kind of create structure in places, or offer ways that you can create structure in places where it's needed. And lastly, we do custom development, all sorts of solutions, including custom integrations using the API and other custom front ends and different aspects for the development of either Atlassian products or other things you might be working on. And yeah, that's it. We have some upcoming webinars here. You can see today we've got Provoking Productive Conflict, but there's also a Jira Bootcamp that you can buy tickets for on April 24th, as well as a couple of other things. Jira Work Management for All is for kind of non-programming and IT teams. We've got another Creating a Foundation of Trust. That's another one with me. So if you want to show up and come there and engage and ask questions, that's a great place to go to. And yeah, if you want to find this, I'll show you right now how you can get there. So if you just go to expium.com and click on training, this is where we have our different trainings. So all the free webinars are here in blue, and all the paid classes are here in green. The team building experiences are the ones that I lead, and you can see our upcoming calendar of events here at the bottom. So that's it, you guys. I'm going to go ahead and check the Zoom and see if we have any questions in our Q&A before I finish here today. Oh, awesome. Okay, so Phil shared something. Thank you for sharing, Phil. So he says, I just created a space horror story with the help of ChatGPT as we were meeting here. I need to spend an hour refining it, rewriting it, and making it my own, but it is great to get the bones of a story. Oh, that's really cool. So Phil is another person who I know is a game master, and looks like he's sharing with us kind of a narrative that he's writing. And I think the point that he's making is that, I use the example of this jungle and, this mercenary company, but the rules of this game are very flexible. So if you, as a leader or as a team, you guys have a certain interest in a genre, that's often pretty easy to execute on, and still be able to create something compelling, especially with the help of ChatGPT, which is unbelievable. Let's see if we have any other questions here. Just want to check. Hold on a sec. Sorry, screen's loading. Boop-a-doo. There we go. So just a couple of things that we have heard in the past from folks. So if someone has never played, is that an issue? No, that's not an issue at all. One of my favorite things is onboarding new people to this. It is literally one of my favorite things in the world to do. It can be very exciting. And I often find that new players will come with a really open mind. But for you, just know that the onboarding process is very thorough, and it's actually remarkably simple to play and do this. We just kind of set the boundaries and the guidelines, and it's certainly simpler than Jira. Are there a lot of rules to learn? I've heard it's very complicated. No, there are not. We have specifically designed something here that is very light on the rules, which is different. There are certainly versions of this game that have quite a few rules baked into them, and that can be part of the fun. I mean, as anyone who loves a good game might know, it can be exciting to dive into the rules and see how they all interact. But that's more for people who are interested in going in the long term, and we like to be able to provide value very quickly for people who are playing. So we've taken great pains to make sure that it is simple and also very engaging and designed to produce a compelling experience for everyone who joins in. Yeah, all right. That's it. If there are no more questions, I think that's where we'll leave it today. I want to thank you all for coming. It's been a real pleasure talking, and I know I can't see your faces or your reactions, but I'm just going to trust that you were loving it the whole time. And yeah, feel free to reach out to us and message, and we hope to see you sometime soon. So thank you all. Have a great day.